And when we look back in 5 years, will we be able to explain the Trump phenomenon? We'll be able to point and say the nation was feeling this and they panicked and they did this? Because I don't believe that America is a nation of white supremacists and all these other things, but maybe I am hanging out with the wrong people. I don't know.
Well, maybe we'll take a break from digging through the rubble with our long poles looking for canned goods to speculate on the causes of the downfall.
Could be that bad, huh?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that like Trumpism is pretty clearly, but in a way that's difficult to articulate, connected to instability in lots of places. And I had a really interesting discussion about what has, in this election, we've started to call the Overton window. It's this old political science term of those things that are legitimate to talk about in politics. Brexit obviously was not within the Overton window, and then it was, and now, anti-migrant sentiment has moved into the Overton window, but also, so too has some, being pro-gay marriage and lots of other things have moved in and out of the Overton window. And I met this woman who was an activist from the Middle East. She'd been #1 on Gaddafi's kill list. She lives in Canada now. And we were talking about the Arab Spring and the election of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, who are, a reactionary party of people whose political ideals are lacking in many ways, but who are also legitimately elected by a significant majority and also deposed through an act of lawless military coup.
Yeah.
And I said, when I look at what happened in Egypt, the only explanation I can find for that vote for the Muslim Brotherhood is that for a long time, the Overton window in Egypt did not include the extremely obvious fact that their crappy dictator got tons of money and guns from America because he was friendly to Israel. Even though that was completely obvious to everybody on the ground and everywhere else in the entire world, the official party line of all the mainstream political parties was we support Mubarak because he's amazing at his job, even though he was manifestly terrible at his job. And that if the only people who say a thing that everyone knows is true and is moreover central to every fact of your life, and especially all the things that makes your life hard, is this one fringe group. It's a bit like Douglas Adams with the towel for hitchhikers. If you've got a towel, they assume that you've got everything else, that you've got a toothbrush and a change of underwear and so on. If you've got the one belief everyone knows is true, it gives all of your other beliefs credibility. And I think that if you look at the populist movements that nevertheless had lots of things that were lacking in them, that were triumphant or are on track to become triumphant, Brexit being one of them, but also the right-wing movements in Greece and Spain, that they do say some things that are true that no one in the mainstream of politics says, right? Trump says elections or politics are governed by money, and that the fact that politicians need to spend in the US Congress 4 hours out of every 8 they spend on the job calling millionaires, asking them for more money, influences the kinds of policies that they make, right? That is so obviously totally true.
Yeah.
And the fact that no one else in the mainstream, apart from Sanders, who not coincidentally gained a lot of support and nearly took the nomination, is willing to say it, probably accounts for a certain amount of his credibility. And the fact that, for all the EU's many beneficial elements, it's also a thing that imposes austerity and is often a creature of the finance industry and has lots of other areas in which it's deficient, like the way that it negotiated ACTA and TTIP. That fact is not a thing that Labour talks about, it's not a thing the Lib Dems talk about, and it's not a thing that the Tories talk about, but it was a thing that Farage talked about. And all of the other things he said about migrants were just wrong. You're entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And his facts were wrong. The numbers of people, what they do to the economy, how they affect our benefits, and how they affect our services, they were just factually wrong. But he said one thing that was factually right, that was really salient to the daily lives of Britons, and that everyone else denied. And I think it gave him some credibility. And I think we have these undeniable contradictions in our world today that have a lot to do with income inequality, with the primacy of finance, with the cult of fiduciary duty that says that if you can make £1,000,001 polluting and get fined £1,000,000 for having done it, you have a duty to your shareholders to do it so that you can disperse the one surplus pound to them. You know, all of these things I think are contradictions that are intrinsically destabilizing. You know, the concentration of political power in the hands of petro companies that are able to deny climate change. These things are salient and they're not going anywhere and they're headed for rupture. And one of the things that all of these populist movements have in common, the ones I support and the ones I oppose, is that they have at least one thing that they talk about that's outside of the realm of our normal political discourse and that everyone can see at a glance has to be true. And then all the other things they say take on credibility. And I think that in 5 years when we look back on Trumpism, we will be mired in more of these weird manifestations